Hey, hey, hey. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see everybody made it to another Sabbath. Tonight we're going to talk about Revelation 6 and the first seal. So if you want to take us out and start us out.
Okay. I just have two little short stories. Remember, Thanksgiving is coming up, so keep that in mind as you hear this story. A grandmother takes her grandson to the beach. And they're out there in Southern California, like in all those beach movies, and they're on the beach. Suddenly, a huge wave comes in, sweeps her grandson out to sea. The grandmother screams. She drops to her knees and she prays, God, bring him back, bring him back, bring him back. Another wave comes roaring back in and deposits the little boy on the beach. Then the grandmother looks up to heaven and she says, God, he had a hat and a beach ball.
I think I've heard that one before.
We're very thankful in the country, aren't we?
Yes, we are. You know what? Probably half the people would say that too.
Yeah. I got my rights to keep all my stuff. This is one where an elderly man goes to the doctor and he says, Doctor, I believe that my wife is having a hearing problem, but she won't admit it. She doesn't really see that she's getting old. The doctor says, well, how bad is the hearing? Well, it's bad. He says, well, I'll tell you what. When you go to the house, stand about 20 feet from her and yell something at her. And then go 15 feet, 10 feet, right on top of her and yell at her. And you can tell how bad it is by when she finally hears you. The guy comes in the house, opens the door. He says, about 20 feet. He yells, what's for dinner? She doesn't seem to hear him. He goes 15 feet. What's for dinner? 10 feet. What's for dinner? He walks right up to her ear and yells, what's for dinner? And she yells back, for the fourth time, vegetable stew.
That's pretty good.
I know it's corny, but it does make a point. We always think it's their problem. But it's really our problem. We're the problem. Was it Opus that said, I've met the enemy and he is us? Okay, that's America's problem to some extent. Well, let's look at Revelation 6:2. I want to just take a real quick overview of the book of Revelation, just so we kind of see how it fits in. Just take a second. And we're going to look at, in this series of programs, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is the first part of it. So what you do is you have 6 seals in the book of Revelation, and the first 4 includes the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then you go into tribulation, heavenly signs. And then you have the 7th seal, which is trumpets, or the day of the Lord. That 7th trump is subdivided into 7 woes, which lead up to Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now that's an overview of the book of Revelation. And what I wanted to say about the book of Revelation in a general sense is, you know how Christ spoke to the disciples in parables and into the crowds in parables? And they asked, well, why do you do that? And he said, because it's given for you to know the truth, but not for all of them to know the truth. So in a sense, Christ was telling him that the Bible is, to some extent, it's like a code. And it's like a code that's in the open, but only the people God gives the key to understand the symbolic code. And I think the book of Revelation is, in some ways, the most coded book in the Bible. Sort of like Daniel. You know, when Daniel, at the very end, Daniel didn't quite understand that last little bit of it. And God said, go your way. It's sealed until the time of the end. And I think Daniel, as well as the book of Revelation, will be, to those of us who are called by God and who answer the call by trying to obey God's commandments. I think as we get closer to the end, the code will become clearer and clearer. But there are some things I think we do see pretty clear. And if you went to 2 Corinthians 3, you'll see that it mentions that there's a veil, chapter 3, over the eyes of the people. Paul was talking about the people in his day. Well, that veil is still there with the book of Revelation, and Matthew 13 talks about the parable. Let me read Revelation 6:2 to start it off. Revelations, the first, someone worthy like Christ has to unseal it. And the first seal, and then verse 2, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. He went forth conquering and to conquer. Now, there are some commentaries, and many in the past have thought that's Jesus Christ. The problem with that being Christ is the four horsemen fit into a context, and the context is evil, because the next one, they all ride horses with different colors, all have bows and similar appearances. Well, somewhat similar. There are differences, but they represent war, famine, and death. Very negative. There's no way that's Jesus Christ. It's Revelation 19 at the end of all this. On a white horse is Jesus Christ coming, and like the famous song, the Messiah, we sings out King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he shall reign forever and ever. That's Matthew 19. That's when Christ comes back and the devil's locked away. But at this point, this is something different. The first thing that happens as these bad things unravel on the first seal is someone coming in a white horse. I think a white horse in that he appears to be Christ, but he isn't Christ. He appears to be righteous, but he's not righteous. He appears to be good, but he's paving the way for worldwide deception on a scale like the world has never seen before. And I think deception, and I was thinking about this, I was using a World War II model. If you're up to something evil, what is the first thing that you want to do? Deceive the people.
Yep. Yeah. That's how they operated in Nazi Germany. Was it Goebbels? Who was the minister of propaganda minister? I forget his name.
Dr. Goebbels.
Goebbels. Okay, yeah, it was Goebbels, and that was his job, and that's all he did. And you can see that in the media every day now. They are trying to deceive us. Matthew 24:24 says that there's going to be false Christ, false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, and they will mislead, even if it was possible, they would mislead the elect. So even the elect would be misled by these people.
By the way, interesting, Dr. Goebbels created his own Hollywood, government run, by the Third Reich. And he called it Babelsberg, like Babylon the Great, Babelsberg. And of course, this is what someone like Hitler would do. They took control of the newspapers, radio stations, and the whole movie industry. It was granted 1930s wasn't what it is now, but they did actually innovate some movie producing techniques like cameras on roller skates and some other, at least for the 1930s it was advanced for cinematography. And Dr. Goebbels had a lot of great ideas. One that I think few people appreciate. He said, you don't want to propagandize people too much when they know you're propagandizing. So he says, disguise it. Put it in entertainment or in various packages where they don't even realize they're being brainwashed and propagandized. And he was smarter than we might think of in today's world. But the first thing they did was prepare the people in Germany, Austria, Hungary, Central Europe for the final solution. And in their own stupid way, they worshipped Hitler. Because Heil Hitler is based on the Roman model, where when Caesar had one of his triumphs in Rome, they said, "Hail Caesar." But the similarity, it's German instead of Latin.
Well, remember, these who we're talking about are absolute masters of deception. And statistically, it shows that the best deceptions always have a measure of truth within them. And that's why it's so hard to discern. So you're going to have to be able to separate the truth from the lie. And God's people are going to have enough knowledge, enough faith, and enough strength to be able to stand back and do that. There's going to be a lot of truth there too, and that's what they'll stand on. But in the end, the deception will be there with it.
Well, they started in the schools and then running the media. The media supported what the schools taught the children. So they would see it at school, then if they heard something on the radio or whatever, it backed it up. So it suddenly became truth in their minds.
Yep, the synergism of all the media, being under the control of evil powers is and they had education under their control too. But if you look at Revelation 6:2, it also mentions he has a bow. Bow and arrow was something that Nimrod carried. He's like the precursor of the beast. He was the first person in place of God, or replacing God as the champion hero for the Babylonian Empire, and pioneered foundation of the Babylonian religion. And also Babylon the Great, they have plenty of artifacts, and they always show the kings on chariots with bows and arrows. And where with Christ it's a sword that comes out of his mouth, the sword of his word. It's just a different analogy. But the bow and arrow, you're being conquered by false Christ, false deception, and it's the starting point. I think that evil starts first as you brainwash the people. I would argue one of the problems that American, at least some parts of American society have, they don't know right from wrong anymore. Hollywood has so got them befuddled in the media and evolution. They don't know if there really is a God. If we're just a cosmic accident, what difference does it make?
Yeah, they're so far from the true God that they don't know they wouldn't know him if they have no idea where to start. They're so far. They don't even acknowledge any God. They definitely can't acknowledge. So they're so far off in left field. They don't know where to start. They've been beat down all these years. Basically, you're told if you're stupid if you believe in any kind of God.
Well, they'll tell you it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to kill somebody, it's wrong to hurt somebody, it's wrong to deceive somebody. They're okay with every bit of it until it comes to the morality part. And I think that's what separates them, because suddenly there's a right and a wrong. And what they may enjoy may not be considered moral in the Bible.
Or like you asked a big question, well, would you sell yourself for prostitution? The guy says, wait a minute. Well, how much are they offering? That's a bad joke. But the point is, when put to the test, they don't believe it all. They say it's situational. Well, if it'll help me, and I have to cheat the government, or I have to cheat the phone company. In other words, morality is all gotten relative. They don't really know right from wrong. For instance, it's off the subject, but not totally. If you want to stay out of poverty, you have a 95% chance of doing it if you can get out of high school, get married before you have a child. If you don't do that, you're 95% more likely to live in poverty. But if you don't believe in marriage and don't believe in getting out of school or getting some kind of job training, you see what I mean? But people are taught no morality. So what difference does it make?
Right.
The blessings of God are like gravity. I can say, I don't believe that I'm going to stick to the earth and jump off of something. I'm going to stick to the earth. God put things in motion. If you do things right, right things happen. If you do things wrong, wrong things happen. The rewards, and blessings and cursings are the same. And you can not believe in God, but if you do If you're chaste, you don't lie, cheat, steal, you finish high school, you wait till marriage to have children, and that kind of thing, you're going to receive blessings.
Yeah. And for those people who did it all wrong, we're not saying that you're locked into poverty. Obviously, people can, can repent of their sins and be late bloomers and turn their life around. But we're just saying morality has benefits, but the world is taught there is no right or wrong, or at least a good chunk of them. And I was thinking about the fact that it's a white horse means it's meant to deceive you into thinking it's Christ, but it's really not Christ. And according to Hislop's book, The Two Babylons, pagan Nimrod was always pictured, and I've actually seen some of they're usually in stone, that survived from archaeology. They're always pictured with a bow and arrow. And so it does fit. As I said, and then Revelation 19:11-16 shows the real Christ coming on a white horse. But this is a false Christ. And I wanted to just go to Matthew 7:15. I mean, all the scriptures we mentioned are important. But I thought Matthew 7:15, actually I got in trouble when I quoted the scripture once at the feast. We were having some trouble, and somebody misunderstood me, saying, "You're accusing somebody of doing this." Well, in a way I was, but it wasn't the person they were thinking about. But Matthew 7:15. But it is true. And in Matthew 7:15, Matthew writes, quoting Christ, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." So in other words, this false prophet who's going to come, I'll use the title Super Pope. Now, whatever titles he takes are going to be even more over the top than the papacy takes now. That's why I call him the Super Pope. However that works itself out. But we do have two popes now, so anything is possible. The Super Pope, everybody thinks he's so wonderful. He's like a sheep. He's a great spiritual guide. But he will be teaching them and setting them up to worship the beast, the false dictator or king or whatever emperor, whatever his title is. He'll say, worship this new emperor. And they're not just saying this new emperor is a god like they did in ancient times. They're saying he is the God, which is, it's even hard to imagine a man even saying that, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't imagine it.
But it happens worldwide in every culture and everywhere. There are guys that come out and people get a following and believe that he's some kind of a god.
Yep, Kim Jong-un, that guy in North Korea, that's what they think he is.
They don't have any choice.
Yeah, they don't.
I may have said this on the program before, but if I did, forgive me. I think the new guy is going to be every bit as evil as Adolf Hitler. He is going to be more cunning than everything else, but he's going to have a smile. He's not. I mean, you can look at Hitler and go, something's not right. This new guy is going to have a smile.
Yeah.
More charismatic.
And I think all the immorality we were speaking about is what he capitalizes on. He capitalizes on that to gain his power and to gain confidence from the mass, the population. He capitalizes on that global immorality.
Well, and the Pope now is making statements like he's not going to make decisions one way or the other on gay marriage and that kind of thing. And he's made a statement, something to the effect of he's open to hear about allowing the priest to marry. I think that opens the doors for the big super churches to say, hey, we can be part of this because I can stay married and we can kind of be part of the mother church and have unity in the world.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I believe he's talking about allowing openly gay priests, and abortion's not such a big deal, or at least that's what I read in the paper he said. Now, yeah, apparently he wasn't able to officially change Catholic doctrine. The bishops didn't buy it, but you get the impression he's moving them in that direction.
Yeah, and you notice not a week can go by without several news stories about him.
I have a Catholic friend that told me that she was concerned that Francis, the original or first Francis, was given the power to change law and doctrine, and she thinks that he may have taken the name Francis in order to have that power that he could change church doctrine. I don't know how true that is. It's just what a lady I know who is a very practicing Catholic told me.
Well, there's a struggle going on within the Catholic Church at this time. With some of the bishops, the leading bishops, are not going along with that, but he's going to win, of course. But one of the American bishops was just demoted because he would not fall in with that. But in the end, he's going to win. But I just wanted to throw in, and we were talking about immorality. Some people don't want morality because with it goes responsibility. But probably just as important as immorality, maybe more important, is the apathy, Christian apathy. People that just don't care one way or the other. You know, there was, I had an article I wanted to print, but I ran out of ink. But Garner Ted once said that being apathetic in a Christian way was like going to dinner in a burning house. He gave it a good analogy there.
When I was in about 4th or 5th grade, the teacher came out with a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay. And this really stuck with me because she said, you should really read this book because some kids have blonde hair and some kids have dark hair and some kids are taller and some kids are fatter and some kids are skinnier and some boys like girls and some boys like boys and some girls like, and I thought to myself, I'm okay, there's something wrong with you because
you
I
see
understand
the progression
tall.
though? You see the progression?
Yes, 40-something years ago.
Yeah, the progression is, you know, blonde hair, some are brunettes, and it works all the way down the line. And what, you know, some boys like boys. I mean, it gets, and you just go as far out with that as you want, but you slowly work it to where you want to end up. And that's what they've been doing for decades. I mean, longer than that. But it seems like Satan has been softening this world up for what's coming around it. He's been softening everybody up to accept what's about to come down the line.
I was talking to my son about this a week or so ago, and he's a bit of a prophet. That's a joke, by the way. He said to me, I said, how did this happen? And he said, 20 years ago, there was a show called Will and Grace, where Will was an open homosexual. He never did anything homosexual, but everybody talked about him being homosexual. So 20 years ago, when some of us were 5, 9, 12, 13 years old, this was in our homes. And because he wasn't doing anything disgusting, he just acted that way, we grew up accepting it. And now the people who are accepting it, their children are now embracing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, Gary, would you like to discuss this whole issue of the public's, as you were saying, lack of love of the truth?
Yes, I can't really, I have a hard time putting it into words, but there is an aversion to morality, but to me, the apathy is the big thing, and lack of love. It probably goes back to the same thing, a lack of responsibility. And different people just don't care to hear it. They just don't want to hear it. Even though they probably have some Christian roots somewhere. Some of the people that I know had Christian roots at one time have just forsaken it. And it's going to get worse. There are going to be, I think there are going to be people that fall out of our own church.
The problem with the truth is once you know it, you've got to do something about it. And nobody wants to do anything. You hear the truth, you've got to change the way you think, you've got to change the way you act, you've got to, all of a sudden, everything you've been doing for decades, you learn you shouldn't do that anymore, and that's going to change your lifestyle. Your friends may not agree with it, and you just want to sweep that all under the rug so you don't have to deal with it. Basically. It's like coming into the church. It's similar to coming into the church because all of a sudden you learn that Christmas is pagan and Easter is pagan and all this stuff. You've got to do something. You've got to act on it. And the general population has that same issue. They have to act on the truth once they get it, and they don't want to hear that because all of a sudden now they can't have all the mess out there that they want, so they just sweep it under the rug, and they sweep God under the rug with it because that's where your morality starts, and they decide that's where the government comes in and says, we're going to take the place of God, we'll give you your morality, and we'll also give you your truth, and that's where we're kind of at now.
Faith without works is dead.
Yep. And at 2 Timothy, real quick, 2 Timothy 4, let's see here, 3 says, "The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables." They don't want to hear the truth. They'll let people draw them right on out of the truth.
I want to kind of go back, if I could. The opposite of love is not necessarily hate. It's narcissism.
Oh yeah,
It's selfishness, and it's fun to do bad things. I mean, who really gets hurt? You know, it's fun to do Christmas and Easter and Halloween and sleep around, and who gets hurt?
Yep.
You know that old saying that if you stand still, you're going backwards. It kind of holds true.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The Bible says that once you know the truth, you are to proceed, go forward, and without fear.
You know, think what it'd be like if you were in at least a lot of mainstream communities and you were a church pastor, and you know the board votes on your salary and whether to fire you or not. And most of those churches, they change pastors every 4 years, unless he's good at politics. And he's thinking, if I preach something that's a little too strong that they don't want to hear, how long will the board put up with me? You know, that's got to be a pretty tough job, don't you think?
It's the same as the global warming scientists. If they don't preach global warming, they don't get their grants, they don't make money, and they gotta they gotta do something else for a living.
That's true.
You know, speaking about that, I had talked to one of my students, and he talked about living and going to South America all the time. And I said, "Were you down there for school, and how'd you get down there?" He says, "My friend's mother is a state senator, and she has to justify a budget. So she'd send her son and me down there for 2 months every summer, and we would talk with people about building roads."
They say cutting the budget of any government bureaucracy is tough business. I can understand it.
Yep. Nobody wants to give up that funds.
No, not a cent. I
Like
was looking
reversing taxes. You can't. It doesn't happen.
I was looking at Isaiah 6:9. This is also a paraphrase New Testament. And he said, "Send me." And he said, "Go and tell this people, hear you indeed, but understand not. See you indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart of this people fat, make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears." This is Isaiah 6:10. "Hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and convert and be healed." It's just like you were saying, Gary and Ken, that God's allowing people to not want to see the truth. It's there, but they don't want to see it. Their heart is fat.
Yep.
I have a friend that's kind of wealthy, and one day he asked me a question about the Bible. He says, "I don't want to hear about the whole Bible. I just want one specific answer." And he said, and I said, "Okay," and I did my best, and I said, "Why don't you want to hear about the rest of it?" He said, "Because I'm happy, and I don't want to change."
And they think knowing the truth will make you unhappy, which is not true, but that's what people think. And you go back to Revelation 6:2, the guy on the white horse. The one reason he'll be able to deceive the world is because their ears are heavy, and they've shut their eyes, and they don't love the truth. And would you cover, Gary, 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3, well, really 3 all the way through verse 11 are worth covering in that same topic about how the world is setting themselves up to not want to see the truth. 2 Thessalonians 2, starts around verse 3 and 4. I got it right here.
Second Thessalonians chapter 2.
Yeah, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. And really, you can read all the way to 11, but that's the 3 and 4, and then 9 to 11 are the key parts.
Beginning in verse 3, it says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who exposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself he is God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you I told you these things, and now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time? For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie." Well, that's exactly what we've been talking about here.
Yeah. I was thinking that little part where it mentioned what restrains it, it's really not clear. Of course, Paul knew, and maybe he told them, but I wonder if God somehow is holding back the full delusion power of the devil until God is ready to let the devil roll out these end-time dictators. God is holding it back. But when God allows it, however that mechanism works, no longer restraining it, I think, just like we said, it's going to be a delusion so great that many members, like former members of the Worldwide Church of God, are going to be worshiping a man.
Yep.
They'll have a hard time believing that people in mainstream Christian Protestant churches will be worshiping a man, but that seems to be what it's saying.
He says if he didn't intervene, that this beast would deceive the whole world, even the elect, if it wasn't for God stepping in and putting a block in it. And I've theorized for years that most of the people in the church, for quite a few of us, this person who becomes this beast would have to be somewhat of a conservative kind of things would have to snap back the other direction from what they are now in order to deceive the whole world. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Very liberal, a very kind of flamboyant, kind of most of the leaders of the world now, most of the people, a good part of the population would see that coming. You would see that. You would say, oh, that's just another, socialist trying to, but this person who becomes this wouldn't be able to do that, wouldn't be able to be an obvious social. They'd have to hide it and somehow appear maybe more socialist towards the people who like that sort of thing, or more conservative. So we'd have to be on our guard. We'd have to have the protection of God in order to avoid being drawn in by such a person.
Well, regardless of how conservative we are, or whatever, if they take your children from a very young age and start educating them, mommy and daddy are old, they don't really get it, and the media, and then they infiltrate the churches to where the churches aren't teaching anything. It's just feel-good services, and after a while, the churches are teaching Baal worship, because you give it 10 years. 10 years is really a long time when you think about a 12 or 13-year-old or 9-year-old. In 10 years, he's voting.
Oh, yeah.
And it changes everything.
Listen to verse 11 one more time. "And for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie." What if it was a personality from the old Worldwide Church of God?
Interesting thought.
That's kind of like, somebody who's real, yeah.
I thought about what you said, Ken, and it struck a chord. In some, maybe it'll be a pagan way, this guy will be pious, like so pious, in some kind of way, and he'll have some religious works to do. And I don't, it won't be that Bible oriented, but it will be pious and in some way that it'll deceive people. And this man is so holy and so righteous. And if he says that this is the true Messiah, we have to believe it. I know as hard as that is for us to saying it, but that is what Paul just said in 2 Thessalonians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he's not just holy. I mean, he healed that sick man, and then that dead person he raised, and he made that lightning come out of the sky, and he healed that Ebola patient, and he wasn't even there. He just said it and touched the TV screen, and people got better. You know, there's people are easily deceived. I may have mentioned this in the past too. I came home one night, and my wife was all upset in the kitchen, and there was some TV evangelist on, and he was going, if you give us your credit card number right now over the phone, we're going to say a prayer and you get the Holy Spirit. But if you mail us a check, we won't do that prayer until it cashes. You won't get the Holy Spirit until that check cashes. And she was so angry, and I said, I can fix it. And I just changed the channel. I think she was enjoying yelling at the TV better than, than watching it.
The check's got it clear before I pray for you.
But you know what? People were doing it.
Well, yeah, people are gullible. It's willingly ignorant. We're told we will be willingly ignorant. That's stupid on purpose. So, it's like I said earlier. In war, when you've got a target, when you've got a city you want to control, or you have a military target. Nowadays, we send in surface to air. I mean, we send in long-range missiles. We bomb the city. And in war, you soften your target up. Then you can go in and mop up real easy. And it just sure seems like that's what has been happening in this country and in this world for the last 100 years. We've just been inundated with softening up the morality of the planet for decades. And he's going to be able to come in and mop it up. It's going to be easy for him.
The first act in any war is to establish communication with the indigenous people. Our churches, our teachers, our politicians are communicators.
Yep.
Oh, it's interesting. In a lot of revolutions, the first target, like when the Russian Empire, the Soviet Empire collapsed, was taking the TV and radio stations. So your version of events is now the truth.
Yep.
And I see the logic in that very easily. It makes sense. And I was looking at Revelation 13, 11 through 13. Revelation 13, I beheld another beast coming out of this earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon. Again, he looks like a lamb, but he's really working for the devil, but he looks like a lamb. He exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And I've often wondered, could the false emperor have been stabbed or shot and somehow comes back? And some people say that's also reminiscent of the Holy Roman Empire. They thought it was destroyed, but it came back. But I get the impression it's more than that. That might be some historic model, but the guy comes back, and he doeth great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And you know what that sounds like? Do you remember when Elijah went to Mount Carmel with the Israelites, and they had the sacrifices all set up?
Mm-hmm.
The other guys couldn't get theirs to burn, but Elijah called down fire from heaven, and said roughly, Jehovah or Jehovah, the God of Israel, he is the real God, and the other guy is a false God. What if this false super pope does this, but instead of directing people to the true God, he's like a false Elijah. He directs them to the false god. Calling down fire from heaven is pretty impressive.
You know, Gullible, if you think about Orson Welles, the show he did back in the 50s, The Spacemen Are Coming, and had the entire town out looking for him, that's, you know, that if that happened, I mean, it can happen again. It can happen on a much more grand scale.
Especially
Yeah, that was quite amazing what happened when he did that program.
People committed suicide.
And then when you also look at further on, it talks about the two witnesses being killed and the whole world celebrating. And when I read that part of the book of Revelation, I say to myself, they must have no Bible knowledge. Because, you know, wouldn't you think, you say, wait a minute, we're not burying these guys, we're celebrating their death, they're laying in the streets of Jerusalem, we're all celebrating. Didn't the Bible talk about that? They're going to get up and walk to heaven, and we realize, uh-oh, we're in big trouble. And the only reason that could work is most people would have no Bible knowledge. Bible IQ, I assume, is going to go down, down, down.
Yeah, and any knowledge at that time will be a wealth, you know, because there will be, what was a famine of the word and a famine of the hearing. So people don't even want to hear about it. And our colleges are teaching that I had a fellow argue with me. So I just did a 6-week course at USF on the Bible, and I can prove that's absolutely false. After 6 weeks, he told me that the Bible said the earth was exactly 6,000 years old. That's nowhere in there. And because they taught him that, they had to be all knowing because they're the university.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about talking to people when they find out some, you know, in the university, or what do they call them? I forget, but where people go to study and all. Just because you've got a school and you pay money to go there doesn't mean the people teaching you know what they're talking about.
No, I had a young girl that was one of my students when she was 8 years old. She's probably close to 30 now. And when she went off to college, I picked on her quite a bit. And I said, oh, you're going to go off to the perversity. And she said, it's university. I said, no, it's a perversity. I'm sending them a wonderful kid. You're going to come back crazy. And, and she did not come back crazy, by the way. But, you know, I liked picking on her about it, and she took it well.
I tell you what, I've seen some of those water worlds, and I think walking around with Jay Leno or whatever, the jaywalk, and they'll go to some place where a bunch of college kids are vacationing, and they'll ask them real simple questions about the Bill of Rights, the Ten Commandments, who's vice president, who do we fight in the Revolutionary War? I mean, really simple stuff.
Who's buried in Grant's tomb?
Yeah, and maybe 1 out of 10 knows the answer. You're thinking, and they vote.
Yeah.
That's scary.
The best one I heard was, oh, the vice president's Condoleezza Rice. Well, at least she's in politics. The rest of them, they named stupid people out there. It's like, give me a break.
I saw one yesterday.
And you wonder how the world's not going to know what's going on. I think it's pretty obvious. They've been softened up.
Well, you got to admit, they probably have some very good parties at these big universities. Party school. Party school and radical professors. It sounds like a great recipe for
what we have today.
What's education, or I don't know. At least in some subjects, that's certainly true. Some subjects, that's certainly true. I wanted to mention one thing. Revelation 12:14 talks about a place of safety, and in Revelation 7:3-9, where it talks about God sealing His people. And I look at it this way: those of us who are on God's side before the tribulation will be in places of safety around the world, and those who are converted during the tribulation will get sealed, you know, in their forehead by God. So it's a little bit like the 10 plagues on Egypt. Even the ones in the tribulation, they might suffer some of the tribulation things that are done by the bad guys in the wars, but God's plagues they'll be safe from. And I believe those of us in the places of safety will probably be safe from all of them, like the children of Israel in land of Goshen. So I think our spiritual goal is to get on God's side before, and to love the truth before all these things happen.
And to hang on and stay there, because that, I mean, keep that oil and keep that lamp oil in there, because that's the long haul is that it could be years, and if it's not as soon as you were thinking it might be, don't get discouraged. You've got to stay the course, no matter what. You don't want to be like the rest of these people that have to endure these problems. If you don't want to go through that if you don't have to.
You read some of those plagues of Revelation, even if we don't fully understand it all. If you're in the world when God brings those plagues on, it's going to be tough on you. Tough. The way it's described, really tough. I don't even want to know what they all are.
You know, when the plagues came,
really bear down.
Yeah.
When the plagues came, they worshipped the different constellations, the sun god, the moon god, all that stuff, and God attacked their gods. But the children of Egypt would have light in their homes when there was no light anywhere else in Egypt. So they were protected by the promise God made to Abraham.
Yep.
And we have that same promise on us, but with a little bit more, because we've got to be found so doing. We've got to be working.
Yeah.
And they were in their own homes. You know, they didn't have to go anywhere. You know, they were. He protected them right where they were.
Don't you think that there will be some who want to turn to the truth at that time, and they may just be seeking out. You know, Ken Hartbarger's neighbor may remember something that Ken said, and he'll go to Ken and say, "Didn't you talk about this several years ago, or what were you selling us?" We need to be prepared for it. Well,
well, you weren't buying it when we were selling it, so but
yeah.
Come on in.
You know, you're right, Gary. Ken might be able to save some of his family members and neighbors.
That's probably going to be. That'll be our assignment at that time, more than likely.
All of us who we live our lives as biblically as we can. And I know we all think that I know we all know that we have a long way to go, but compared to the rest of the world, they probably see us different than how we see ourselves. They don't, because we dwell on our faults more than I'm sure the other people see it. And they know that we're always gone during the feast. We're always not accessible, on the Sabbath. I mean, and we are routine, and we stick to the truth, and we stick to our convictions and our beliefs in God. And that, in times of crisis, to some people, will be a trigger to say, wait a minute, this person mentioned these things, and if they know that we are not, caught up and involved in them, the things that are coming down in Revelation, they're going to say, hey, look, these people, or this person, Dave, he's been talking to me at his shop for years about this sort of thing. We need to seek him out and ask some questions and see what we need to be doing, because this isn't working.
I had a fellow that I worked out with 20 years ago, and I told him all this kind of stuff, and he's a good guy. He reads his Bible, but he wasn't getting it. And maybe a year ago, he sent me a message, and he said, Dave, you told me all these things would happen in the government, and all these things would happen worldwide 20 years ago, and I didn't disbelieve you, but it was hard to believe. And he said, I trusted you as a friend, but now, Dave, could you please preach on, because I see it. It took him 20 years, but he sees it.
Ted told a story after the Berlin Wall came down. He said he waited and waited, and finally there was one small radio station that called him and said, didn't you predict this 8 or 10 years ago? He said, well, actually, my father and I have been preaching that for much longer than that. But out of the entire world, there was only one small radio station that called him and pointed out that he had predicted that.
Were they in Houston?
I think it was Texas. I think it was.
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, that's interesting. You know, the 25th anniversary was the previous weekend. It's a national holiday in Germany for the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I asked groups of students what was the significance of it. Out of a class of about 40 or 50, there'll be one that will know. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
And these are, you know, fairly smart people, and most of them, all they teach them in high school for history is politically correct pablum.
Did you see the NBC News documentary on it just a couple weeks ago?
I don't think so.
They said that they didn't realize when they gave the people permission to begin to cross the wall that everybody would go. They thought there would be a few curiosity seekers that might go over to the west and then come back. They had no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was like an exodus.
We remember that day every year because our youngest son was born that day.
Really? That's cool.
The actual day. My wife was in labor watching the wall come down.
Wow.
Wow. What day of the what November date is that? November.
I have no idea. What is it? 9th.
November 9th. Okay, I know it's something like that. Might get my dates right. November 9th. That's wonderful.
Yep. Well, is there anything else we want to cover?
We were talking about maybe we could do next week. We could do the other 3 horsemen of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: war, famine, and death. They would all those naturally unpleasant topics go together.
We'll give it our best shot.
Yeah, I know it's not a popular topic, but I do think, you know, there may be a few interesting things. We're going to have to speculate on that, but maybe a little speculation might be good. So when the real thing comes, you might say, you know, maybe we weren't so far off on some of it. We'll be at least watching it.
Or you'll say, what were those guys thinking when they...
Well, there's speculation, and then there's an educated guess.
Yeah.
All I know is if I'm wrong on anything, I point at one of you guys. He told me to say that. I got an email. It was in a memo.
You better save that email, man. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our viewers. We appreciated every Sabbath for those of you that watch us, and throughout the week, and till YouTube, as long as they leave us up here. We appreciate that too. And everybody have a great Sabbath. Enjoy it. Up north here, we're enjoying hot beverages because of our neighbors to the east got quite a bit of snow. If you were watching El Roker in his 400-hour, what was it, his weather forecast, he broke the record. But yeah, it's been interesting up here. So good night, everybody. Always seek the kingdom, and have a great Sabbath.
Good night.
Great.